I would like to welcome you all and thank you for taking the time to join us today. The webinar, Deming's Greatest Contribution to Quality Management. We appreciate your attendance. I will first address some logistical issues for the session and then introduce our guest speaker, Mr. Robert Spencer. We do have a lot of material planned for this 1-hour webinar, so the audio will be muted for the remainder of the presentation to ensure that we are able to get through Robert's entire presentation in the time allowed. We will not be able to hear you as a participant, but you will be able to hear Mr. Spencer and also submit any questions through the chat function. Please do send us text questions through the system, and if we cannot answer those questions either during the presentation or at the end of the webinar, we'll either follow up with an email or a phone call response. This webinar will also be recorded and made available at smartersolutions.com within 24 hours. For registering for the webinar, you will receive an email with a link to the recording. Please know that as a participant in this webinar, we do want to hear from you. At the end, we will present multiple contact options, including a survey, for your feedback. So please go ahead and fill that out so we can know a little bit more about you guys. I will now introduce our presenter, Mr. Robert Spencer. Robert Spencer is an adjunct professor in the Masters of Science program in Quality Assurance at California State University, Dominguez Hills campus. He teaches courses in customer requirements analysis, change management, quality management systems, work process analysis, supply chain quality assurance, and applied statistical analysis using statistical package for the social sciences, statistical analysis system, JUMP, R language, and environment for statistical computing and graphics, and Minitab. His experience in business process management systems began in the late 70s with federal social program impact evaluation studies using continuous improvement tools and techniques. He holds a Master's of Science in Quality Assurance, an MA and a BA degrees in psychology. Robert is the editor of the ASQ Quality Management Division Quality Management Forum, which is a peer-reviewed professional journal. Robert, so good to have you. Thanks for joining us. We are looking forward to your presentation today.
Thanks so much, Elon. I appreciate your introduction, and it's really a pleasure to work with Smarter Solutions and Forrest Breifogel in presenting this topic today. Okay, we'll get underway with reviewing why Deming's contributions to quality management are so important to us in the quality profession. I have 3 bullet points here that I will speak to throughout the webinar. Why is this topic relevant to current business process improvement initiatives? We look back to Deming in the early 50s up through the early 90s, a very, very long career, and his focus was primarily in the manufacturing environment, and now we see that his thinking carries forward across all domains and industries concerned with quality of service and quality of products. We will be sharing some perspectives here that reinforce Deming's original teachings about improving the business system. And why is this topic relevant now in the year 2016 as we have gained considerable experience in business process improvement in both manufacturing and service industries? Here's a picture of Dr. Deming. I attended his training seminar, a full week training in Costa Mesa, California around 1990. I met him personally, had a chance to chat with him. In fact, I was so impressed the second day of the seminar on Tuesday, I showed up a half an hour thinking I could get him to sign my book Out of the Crisis, and there was about 35 other people in line already ahead of me, but I eventually was able to speak to him. And one thing that impressed me throughout that training was his love of people. He loved groups of people. He loved individuals, and it was very clear in my mind and in that group of about 60 people in that training session that he was interested in the system of quality management, but recognized the importance of people driving that system. Here are some points that are relevant: pursuing quality at the process level, or are we pursuing quality at the systems level? Dr. Deming insisted that the business context should embrace expectations of everyone from the senior executive leadership down through shareholders of the organization, customers, suppliers, employees, and the community environment. He was very sensitive to a holistic or total perspective in terms of quality management. And the aim of any organization should be that everybody gains, everybody inside the organization as well as all customers and investors in the business. Dr. Deming's greatest contribution to quality management theory and practice was to view an organization as a system. And that's a point here that I want to speak to, having a number of decades of experience in business process improvement in both government and private sector organizations. I recognize that oftentimes in a Lean Six Sigma project, we tend to focus at the project level, or excuse me, the process level, and in some cases lose sight of the system level. And that's what this presentation today will be about, to focus on the system and the significance of that focus for success in our process improvement initiatives. Deming's view of the organization as a system, he characterized a system like an orchestra. Many of us have attended an orchestra, and we quickly lose sight of the individual members of the orchestra, even the conductor, because the total experience is why we're there and what we appreciate. He said that the system perspective is much more than just paying attention to illustrious players, but more so how they all work together. In fact, at a certain point, they all blend together, and we lose sight of the individual virtuosos. The conductor, as a manager, establishes and maintains cooperation within the system of the orchestra, and there are other aims for an orchestra, such as joy in the work and the accomplishment of the conductor in leading that effort. Deming defined a system, which we would refer to as an organization, as a network of interdependent components that work together to accomplish the aim or aims of the system. When all the connections and interactions are working together to this shared aim, we can achieve tremendous performance results, and those we recognize and we measure them as effectiveness, efficiency, customer employer satisfaction, and profitability, and of course market share. If you've traveled across the country, if you go through the Midwest, it's very flat. You can stand on the hood of your car and see into another state practically, but you'll notice many silos. Individual farms have their own individual silos, and oftentimes we refer to silos in the business organization. We also call them functional units. And when you travel across country, you wonder if all of those silos were coordinated as a system, how much smoother the supply and demand would become, and the supply chain would be much more effective, costs would go down, and so on. But when everybody manages their own silo to their own personal benefit, then we fail to obtain those desired benefits. Dr. Deming spoke about profound knowledge, and it helps us, I think, if we look at types of knowledge that we accumulate and share and attempt to instill in the workforce. Number one is explicit knowledge. I characterize this as much of the material in an ISO 9001 quality management system. We have manuals, we have documents, we have procedures, we have standard work statements, standard operating procedures, and so on. We can create an inventory of explicit knowledge and make that available. I worked in a very sophisticated database marketing company for a period of time, and we had a Lotus Notes environment where we captured and organized in a database explicit knowledge so that anybody in the organization could quickly access knowledge that they needed to conduct an analysis or satisfy a customer requirement. We have implicit knowledge, which is inferred through communications between people, socialization. It's often unspoken. It may not be expressed formally. It's sometimes unstated, like dissatisfiers in the Kano model of customer satisfaction. We don't often observe it easily or attempt to measure it. Tacit knowledge is in the form of skills and expertise within the individual worker that cannot be communicated easily. It must be seen or experienced. Deming encouraged Japanese leadership to come over to the United States and observe American business in action, and they did so. And some of them, I forget who it was now, they went to a supermarket and they saw the concept of safety stock on the shelves and a quick turnover of inventory, and the way in which the checkout stand captured the depletion of the inventory, and that became a basis for much of the lean processes body of knowledge. Keep in mind here at the bottom, all knowledge acquisition requires action learning because knowledgeable is a perishable stock. It has a rate of decay, and we call that the law of forgetting. That is why we have continuous improvement initiatives, not only to find unique, innovative, and creative new solutions, but also to maintain the effectiveness and viability of solutions that we're already using in the organization. A systems approach to quality management. Deming said often that the vast majority of problems that businesses having exist in the system. They don't exist in individual people. We all know that Deming said about 85% of problems are system level and about 15% are people level. Those of us who have worked in large bureaucracies, large corporate settings can attest to the validity of that kind of statement. And it's very significant that we need to look to the system to attend to the opportunities, much like a Pareto analysis, to focus on problems that we can solve versus problems that deal with people that are a different type of issue. A systems perspective requires that management views the organization as many internal and external connections. Supply chains now go back to the origination of the products that enter into the supply chain and get modified and manufactured along the way. We have the concept of a pedigree in pharmaceutical products that traces a product from its raw state to its finished state. Viewing quality as a management system promotes a creation of an organizational culture that values and seeks employee ideas for business improvements. If you've read Mike Rother's book, Toyota Kata, we see how that plays out in reality in the Toyota production system, which is recognized as a premier manufacturing environment that promotes quality end to end.
Robert, I'm going to interrupt you for a second. We've got a question here that kind of deals with what you're talking about. We have an attendee who asks, why in the 21st century do we still find companies with leaders that don't know how to share and communicate to the players Deming's value?
Well,
from
I'll
your
address that.
Experience. Yeah.
My experience is hundreds of students at the master's level. These are mid-career professionals who have been in the quality profession and worked their way up. They have ASQ certifications and other relevant professional certifications, so they know a lot about quality, and they typically report that there's a disconnect or a partial connect between executive leadership and mid-level management down to the line supervision level, that the story gets passed down, it gets distorted, it's unclear, the strategic viewpoint of the organization included in a strategic plan, the goals and initiatives are not well articulated and made visible. And so that is one of the reasons why we have problems. Deming would have said we begin with the strategic plan and we roll that down or cascade it down throughout the organization. And it appears that many executive leaders think somehow by osmosis that will happen. It needs to be a concerted, formal effort with energy and resources behind it to communicate the same story so everybody's on the same sheet of music.
Great, thank you. Thanks for taking that question there.
Now I'm going to go on to the Plan, Do, Study, Act cycle, the PDSA cycle, which was introduced to Dr. Deming from Walter Shewart of Bell Labs in New York. And most of us who have studied the history of quality know that Bell Labs contributed a great amount of understanding and insight. Our control charts, statistical process control, or SPC charts, were the brainchild of Walter Shewart. And Deming recognized the opportunity for the mentorship there, and he adapted the Plan, Do, Study, Act cycle to quality as we understand it now. And this was not something that happened out of the clear blue. I've listed the steps, the detail steps, because most of us talk about them. This would be a resource to go back and see the detail that Deming included in the PDSA cycle. This would be a review. It's helpful. You don't have to go back to a textbook. You can just call up this slide deck. And we understand the PDSA cycle to be a continuous loop. We don't ever finish the cycle. We continue forward to obtain, as I mentioned before, innovative and creative new solutions, as well as reinforce existing solutions that work well. The congruence of PDSA with the scientific method is shown in this slide, and if you look through here, you'll see the consistency between the traditional scientific method and the PDSA method, recognizing, of course, in a scientific method we have a loop that is the inductive logic and a corresponding loop in the opposite direction called the deductive logic. And you can go on the web and get more detail and a more greater detailed explanation of the scientific method. But I wanted to demonstrate that here, that PDSA is not exclusive to quality. It's part of the bigger picture of the scientific method and scientific inquiry. Deming's 14 points, most of us have heard those and have actually studied them. The bulk of the causes of low quality and low productivity belong to the system and thus lie beyond the power of the workforce. And that is patently true. I see it in hundreds of master's theses that are trying to solve the intractable, difficult, even vexing problems in their organizations. And invariably, we see PDSA involved, we see CAPA programs involved, root cause analysis. Those are the three powerhouse tools that our students are using to solve the big problems. And I'm talking about problems in aerospace industry, in high-end manufacturing, automobile manufacturing, both domestic and foreign, in pharmaceutical manufacturing, medical devices manufacturing, medical laboratory, process control, and quality. We have students in all of those domains and industries, and these are the issues that they bring to the table for their capstone papers. Here is a listing of the 14 points as Deming presented them in his book in 1986, Out of the Crisis. They're worth reviewing, and you can test yourself on how consistent your role and responsibilities are with respect to these 14 points. So I'm listing them here. I don't want to spend a lot of time just speaking to them or just telling you what they are. They're here, and you can look through these, and you'll see some issues in your own organizations that definitely go against these 14 points. So that's not a surprise. You're in good company that most organizations have these kinds of problems. Here's the remainder of the 14 listed for you. I talked earlier about silos, functional units. Forrest goes into great detail with tremendous insight into why those problems exist and the solutions to those in a perspective that looks at the quality of an organization at the systems level versus process level. People must work as a team. That seems to be a given, but how many of us have been in teams where we physically get together in a meeting room versus virtual teams where people are being pulled from different parts of the country, even different parts of the globe, to work together? That's always a challenge. Such things as management by objective, numbers and numerical goals. Deming was very adamant about the risks of management to arbitrary numeric goals and accomplishments. And one of the things that we see that Forrest brings out very clearly in his work is that we'll see an end of quarter, an end of report period, surge in activity, depletion of inventory, so that the numbers look good, and therefore the numbers are questionable. They may not even be valid as a measurement of the quality of the system itself. I'll go on here to the 7 deadly diseases of management. These are the most serious barriers that management faces to improve effectiveness and continuous improvement. And here they are listed. Most of these apply. Some may be present. They're behind the scenes. All of us have been in positions where there seems to be a carousel of new management joining the organization for a period of time and then leaving. Each brings in a different perspective and a different focus, and that makes it very hard to maintain a system with a long-term objective. I remember reading once that Sony, Mitsubishi, some of those major Japanese companies have strategic plans that date out 100 years into the future. And it's not a surprise that, pardon me, that their management teams are in place for extended periods of time compared to what we experience in the United States.
And Robert, I have another question here to the management point. An attendee asks or states that they agree to your point that issues are system related. And she says, however, when we highlight these issues, business owners are not ready to change. How, in your experience, do we manage this?
Well, keep in mind that business owners, that's a very appropriate term. They own the business, meaning they own responsibility for the performance of that business unit. And so it's very difficult for them to relinquish control to a systems perspective when their success, their evaluations, their performance evaluations and their bonus and so on is related to performance that they believe they can control. However, we know from extensive experience that when we take a systems perspective and we ask that all of the functional units coordinate and cooperate effectively, that the overall business will be more successful, more profitable than if we suboptimize individual functions because of the desires or influence of individual business owners.
Great, thank you. That's a great answer.
Okay. I'm on the slide now with beyond business process improvements to integrated enterprise excellence. Forrest refers to integrated enterprise excellence as IEE. It's his concept for the next step in Lean Six Sigma performance improvement studies. I've read his entire suite of books. There must be 6 or 7 in that series, I forget offhand. They're a superb resource for anyone who wants to be successful in their Lean Six Sigma projects, in their protocol projects at the Quality Improvement Project Management Office level. IEE takes a different perspective. It takes some of the best practices in Lean Six Sigma and uses those to identify and manage and promote business process improvement. I did a Google search on business process improvement, and in the 10 identified URLs that came up, I did this 3 different times, so I may have gotten a different suite of the top 10 on each search. None of the URLs mentioned the word system in describing the purpose of a typical business process improvement study. Not in the strategies, not in the activities, and not in the perspective. And that says a lot because in my experience, working with some very much leaders in business process improvement across the country, if not across the world, through the ASQ Quality Management Division, we find that a process improvement office will push projects out to the functional units based on expectations, demands, opportunities, availability of resources, and Forrest says that's the wrong way. Business managers should be pulling for improvement in their organization based on their understanding of the contribution of their organization, their functional unit, to the overall strategy, goals, and objectives of the organization. Forrest also points out how we can take a look at the tools of statistical process control and identify a period of performance stability. It may be for the last several weeks or months. There's no recognizable special cause variability. It's all common cause. It's the variability of the process. It's the business speaking to us via the voice of the business. And we can ask a question which is somewhat profound here, quite profound actually. I used to see this as an equation: no change equals no change. No change equals no change. So you're going to get what you've always gotten because you haven't changed the input side of the system. Forrest makes this a little more sophisticated, and he says, let's ask the question, given the performance that we have in sight here, we feel it's stable because it hasn't varied outside of reasonable limits over the last substantial period of time, weeks or months. And he says, what is the cost of doing nothing different? If we stay the course, we don't do anything different, what is the cost? Well, then you have to ask questions that really go back to your strategic plan, such as market share, competition, technological advances, opportunities either realized and jumped on or disregarded and lost, etc. So Forrest is actually built within the Minitab application a module that will give you the statistical process control SPC viewpoint of a variable. Hopefully it's a strategic variable, and then the normality chart of that distribution. And it's very easy to say, based on the look at that chart, you can do it visually. You don't have to have numbers and analysis. 80% of the time, this is what we're going to get. Is that satisfactory? Or 60% of the time, we're going to be in this particular range of outcomes. Is that good for our business going forward? IEE focuses on the organization as a system. It demands, it asks for metrics, quality metrics that exist at the system level, and I'll get to that in just a minute here with some nice graphics that Forrest presents in his textbooks. We're not so much concerned with the process, only to the extent that that process optimization contributes to recognizable benefits at the system level. Forrest gives a number of examples in his textbooks where a project was identified in advance as an opportunity to save $1 million. Well, that sounds great. Who wouldn't want that? But when all is said and done and the project is implemented, it's been in process now and stable for a period of months, nobody can find the savings. Where did they go? Well, it could be that the savings in one process improvement caused problems elsewhere in the system, either ahead of or behind the change that was made, so that the savings were lost. They were no longer in existence. So this is a nice chart here that shows the comparison between typical business process improvement projects versus IEE based projects. Here's a polling question that you will be able to answer, and we'll get some results here to share as a group, those on the call, to understand where you are in your own organization with respect to business process improvement. And the question here is, are you able to connect the dots between the top-level strategies, associated processes, and metrics within your organization? Connect the dots means, do you understand at your level in the organization, regardless of where that is, how consistent your activity day in and day out is with the executive leadership expectation? When I worked in a Fortune 25, 80 billion a year company in pharmaceutical distribution, we had a very sophisticated and observable strategic planning function, and we had a very nice multicolored card, like a postcard, a fold-out postcard, that every one of us was given. I posted that on my cubicle wall. I took some thumbtacks and I pasted it right there in front of me so that I knew what the strategy of my organization was and what my responsibility to that strategy was. So every time I picked up the phone to talk to a customer, I had those thoughts in mind. I had those words and those thoughts. If a call came in, I also looked right at that that picture of our quality strategy to make sure that I was answering questions and being responsive to our customer needs in relationship to strategy. So please take a moment to indicate the degree to which these responses align with your organization and your expectations and obligations to your strategy. Okay.
Yes, and thank you for participating with that. It's always good to hear your voice as a participant. We've also got a couple of questions we'll pose to Mr. Spencer in a moment as well. But it looks like we've, I'll go ahead and looks like most people have voted. I'll close the poll and share the results. We've got a great audience. Nobody said that this is not important. So what we're talking about here is definitely something we want to focus on in our organizations, the system thinking. 67% said somewhat. There was a 17% of the audience said definitely they're able to connect those dots, and then kind of a similar number, 12% said not at all. So we've kind of got both ends of the spectrum, most people there in the middle with somewhat, and 5% unsure. So Robert, I'll go back to your slides and hide that poll results. Thank you for your participation.
Okay, you're welcome, Elon. Those results are pretty much within the expectation that I would want to see or be comfortable with seeing. It's not surprising that less than 20% of people are entirely clear about their role and responsibility. Deming made a real point about every person in the organization knowing their personal contribution to the of that organization. And I would mention another book that I think is excellent here by Pascal Dennis. Last name is Pascal. It's a lean book, a very excellent resource, and he talks about the disconnect or partial connect between strategy and implementation up and down the line. Forrest does so as well, that many people are not entirely clear about why are they coming to work, and once there, what am I supposed to do? What's the value of that? Most people, and my experience and probably your experience, want to feel that they're making an important contribution, that their time is well spent, that they're on target, that they're making a difference. And so those poll results show that we have some room for improvement in communication down the organization as well as up the organization. And Toyota Kata, the line worker, oftentimes trains his or her supervisor, who in turn trains his or her manager. And so the process is in place for us to follow, and it's just a matter of getting familiar with the resource and how other people are doing it rather than reinventing the wheel. So thanks for putting that in there, Elon, because it's very relevant to Deming's teachings.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Okay. Okay, so I'm back. I'm trying to go down to our next slide. Okay, here we go. All right, here's Deming's systems thinking implemented within the IEE methodology. So for say, first of all, go out and find out what the system goals and performance are. How have they been defined? That should be in the strategic plan of the organization. And you know, some organizations I know on our quality management division leadership team, we have people that are doing Hoshin Kanri types of strategic planning, very sophisticated, very thorough, and a very formal flow down throughout the entire organization. Others may not be doing anywhere close to that, but in any event, this is an opportunity in IEE to first of all look for the strategy, goals, and performance expectations as they've been defined by leadership, and if they're not entirely clear, there needs to be some effort to understand what they should be so that we're not chasing after metrics that are unrelated or only partially related to the goals of the organization. Once you have this strategic perspective, then you can identify process improvement through strategic projects. In other words, focus your effort, the significant few amongst the insignificant many projects that could be possible, focus on those that have a strategic focus and a strategic benefit. And so that's what Forrest is pointing out here, that we can run astray if we don't know where we're trying to get to from the outset. Performance metrics that manage for benefits of the organization, these would be our critical to quality and key performance indicators as quality metrics that really deal with the strategy of the organization. And oftentimes, in order to understand what we should be measuring, we need to go to the Gemba where the action takes place in quality function deployment as a quality management system. It's very clear that we use the Gemba to observe firsthand what we should be doing and whether or not we're actually performing the expectation and actually measuring what it is we think we're attempting to work on. Now, Forrest has taken IEE value chain to a greater level of detail here, and this is an example from a large hospital system. He has a system on the back end that will call up these various layers of performance of a business process improvement project. But it's informative here, and I'm glad that he suggested that I include this slide in the presentation. I know that Mike Rother on his reference book on value stream mapping, he mentions the value of creating a current value stream map, current of the organization. As the organization is expected to work, then you'll have another current value stream of how it actually works. There'll be some disconnects and disparity there, so that's your reality check on what you think it's doing versus what it's actually doing, the system itself. And then the next step is to create a future state value chain map or value stream map of how you would like things to be, recognizing that as you work through the actual versus the desired, and then compare that to the future expectation that that future will continually change. But this is a good way to understand the system perspective versus the process perspective, because there are many different processes in a value stream, and you will work through those, but you need this overarching picture at the outset. And then here's another perspective from Forest System, where align processes with performance metrics within the IEE system perspective. Remember, we're talking about IEE as the Deming systems thinking perspective, as opposed to what we see in many business process improvements using Lean Six Sigma as the methodology, where we tend to get bogged down in processes as opposed to systems. Remember, at the outset in the define, we have a very simplistic overview of the system. I think there's 5 steps in a SIPOC, and that is basically not enough information to really understand the system versus falling into a perspective that highlights processes only. And you can probably call up your slide and enlarge this a little bit and see the detail here. This again is a hospital system. In our program, we have about half of our students in hospital systems, and so I see a lot of process improvement initiatives and projects designed to improve how patients are treated and how they're discharged, and under the new Affordable Care Act, making sure that we don't experience penalties for recidivism back into the system. Okay, here is an example of a output from Minitab that I mentioned earlier, where Forrest has created a module. You can embed this within your Minitab version 17 application, and you'll see there's some SPC charts, and beneath that the normality plot of the data from those charts. And it's a very simple process to look to the right-hand side of the normality chart. There's some bars there, and you can very quickly identify the 80%, 80% or 67% or 10% or 5% range of performance you would expect given this system performance. And of course, we don't see any outliers there, nothing out of control, and so we assume that this is a good representation of the randomness inherent in the system we're looking at. So this is a real nice step. It saves a lot of work in Minitab having to go through a secondary analysis. You can just get it all in one fell swoop. Oop, I'm sorry here, I hit things with 2 fingers rather than 1. Okay. Forrest introduces the concept of a satellite level metrics in an IEE value chain, and he gives some examples here: gross revenue, profit, net profit margin, EB, IDA, voice of the customer types of metrics. If you've traveled across country via commercial airliner, as you fly over the Grand Canyon, the pilot will come on and say, oh, beneath us is the Grand Canyon. If you're on a window seat, you look out and, oh, there looks to be a a marking on the ground. You really can't see the Grand Canyon. You're flying over it, but from a high level, you know you're there. The pilot has positioned you at that point, and you know that you're so far along in your journey across country, but that's about all that you see. So these kinds of measures are very high level, but they are sensitive to the system in operation. Forrest brings down the view to the 30,000 foot level, and at that point you can begin to see some characteristics of the Grand Canyon as you're flying over. You'll see the north rim and the south rim. You may even see the Colorado River in the base of the mile-deep trench. And here you'll have the kinds of measures that you're pretty much experienced with. I don't see work in progress. That would be one that I would typically add in. Inventory levels and so on. Well, he's got inventory, so that's covered. Market share and all kinds of metrics there. Now, if you were to go further below 30,000 feet down to the 10,000 feet or the 5,000 feet or the 500 foot level, or ideally, if you were standing on the rim of the Grand Canyon and you looked over, you might experience a little vertigo, because in some places you look over and it's pretty much straight down for 1,000 or more feet. So it's somewhat frightening, but it's exhilarating to see that resource up close. And that's where we get to with metrics. Some are high level, but they're sensitive to the system. Others are intermediate level and more detail, more coverage of the system. And some are at a very direct level. This could be what often happens in care situations like hospitals and hospitality situations, big motel chains, hotel chains, is that information is captured in the voice of the customer in the words, and we can use text analytics to drill down to the detail of what somebody spoke through their own mouth about their experience. And so that would be getting much closer to ground level as an example. So this is what IEE is based on: different levels of perspective, sensitivity to measurements, metrics that are indicative of the performance of the system as a whole, and not just individual unique processes. All right. I included here a slide so that any of you who are interested about the MS degree in quality assurance through California State University, Dominguez Hills. Our program's been in place since the early 1980s. It's a very sophisticated, mature degree program. Almost all of our students are mid-career professionals. They have 10, 12, 15 years of experience. They have the professional certifications and designations and work history, and many of them are coming back to get an academic degree to add to their vitas and resumes and make themselves more employable. Most of our students, I think around 60–70%, report promotions within 12 months after the granting of their degrees. So we have access via Facebook and also LinkedIn, and directly with this URL at the top of the page. So if you're interested, take a look. We have about 400 students in the MS degree program. About 15% are international. They're outside the United States in foreign countries. And the biggest benefit that I hear from my students is the range of experience and exposure and contributions to our online program. It's just amazing. I would think they would like me most, but actually they like the fact that their course is composed of 20 or 25 students from around the world, different industries, and they learn tremendously from that perspective. All right, I'd like to open up now formally to any questions that anybody has, and I'll attempt to answer them.
Well, thank you, Robert. And before I read some of these questions, we do have a number of questions coming in. I just wanted to, again, thank you for your passion and your experience in the area. As you mentioned, you've been trained personally by Deming, sat in on a presentation by him for a week. and then you've had decades of experience. So we appreciate you sharing that with us. And then also for coming to us with this presentation and your ideas for this, and just your eagerness to share, the expertise that you've got. I will go ahead and start reading some of the questions, and I'll just read them as you guys have written them in. In regards to lean, how do you foresee the combination of Deming and the lean thinking?
Well, lean began in the early 50s, and that's when Deming was really prominently engaged with manufacturing in Japan. Remember, their manufacturing capability had been all but destroyed in World War II, and they needed a bootstrap. They needed somebody to come in and help, and Deming and Duran and those early fathers of quality were there to help out. And so lean was developing simultaneously with improvements in manufacturing, and I don't know for sure. I haven't read anything about Deming that has said that he acknowledged lean. I don't think the term was even prevalent in use then, but I think that Deming himself would have been a proponent, would have spoken up about it if it had been a term available early on, because one of the things that he always criticized American manufacturing was for the amount of clutter in factories, the discards, the rejects just piling up around, and clutter is a distraction. It's always within view, it's in your peripheral vision, and it gets in the way. So I'm sure that Deming would have said that we got to get rid of that, and if we want to call that lean, then so be it. Whatever we need to call it, we need to address it.
Thank you for that opinion on lean. Similarly, we'd like to know your thoughts on the balanced scorecard fitting into Deming's thoughts.
Well, that's one thing that Forrest is very clearly in favor of, a balanced scorecard, which would integrate financials along with performance objectives. And the issue there would be, of course, is the scorecard addressing the system of the organization and the strategic goals at a high level. Obviously, you can have multiple scorecards within an organization. I was in a hospital where they had a quality wall, and there must have been 30 or so Excel spreadsheet printouts, and it was a hodgepodge. It was chaos, really, to try and understand what was going on. They needed a scorecard that showed the high-level strategic objectives. One would be recidivism within 30 days, because that's an affordable care issue. Patients that are discharged and returned within 30 days, they either get no payment or partial payment on their reimbursement for services rendered. So the quality wall in that hospital was just a bunch of detail. It didn't really communicate, so a scorecard has to communicate what's most important. And then, of course, you could have other scorecards at the functional level that say how well are we doing within our area of functional responsibility.
Great, thank you. Before the webinar, many people submitted what they thought was, in their opinion, Deming's greatest contribution. So you're saying that the greatest contribution Deming gave is the idea of system thinking. Some other people suggested maybe his books, maybe his idea of culture. And a question here is about his books. What is your favorite book that you would recommend to start?
Well, my favorite book was Out of the Crisis. I picked that up as soon as it was published, I believe 1986, and I enjoyed it so much that I shared it with everybody I could think of, work colleagues and students along the way, and it's somebody kept it way back when. I don't even have a copy any longer, but that was a phenomenal book. Deming didn't mince words. He spoke the truth. He spoke reality. He wasn't afraid to be controversial. I think he was on one of those television broadcasts, if Japan can, why can't we? That dates back to 84, I think, even before his book. So my favorite book of his was Out of the Crisis.
Great, thank you. And what was the book you mentioned by Dennis Pascal?
It has to do with lean. He gives an example of essentially a senior, experienced black belt trainer and mentor, coach within an organization, and he goes through many, many examples. There's so much material in that book, and I should be able to remember the title. It may be Lean Thinking. That kind of comes to mind here. Pascal Dennis, DENNIS, I believe, PASCAL. You can find it on Amazon. It's an inexpensive book. I put it in my recommended reading list for all of the courses I teach.
Great, thank you. Kuhn would argue that change will not occur until crisis hits. What has been your experience in getting the attention of a business leadership to affect change prior to crisis hitting?
Well, that's true. Crisis promotes an urgency and a recognition of change, but oftentimes the change is not effective. It's a knee-jerk reaction. It's not a response to a circumstance. And so basically that's the role of a strategic planning session. And Hoshin Kanri is the most detailed quality-focused strategic planning methodology. So you can get white papers on Hoshin Kanri. You can get books that go into detail on that, and look through that and see that change in that environment is a response to circumstances and a response to the analysis of those circumstances. As I said, change under crisis is reaction. It's a knee-jerk. It's going to get you out of the hot water at the moment, but it's probably not going to lead to a long-term solution that you'll want to live with very long.
Thank you. Another question here regarding Deming's consistency of purpose. I expect that many new CEOs would say they're changing the strategic direction because previous CEOs' plans were wrong or misguided. Have you seen any examples of this or familiar with Deming talking about this?
Well, there's always the risk that when new leadership comes in, they throw out wholesale the past and they implement what they're comfortable with or familiar with or can actually port in from their prior assignments. And what Deming was speaking about, constancy of purpose, is that you agree that this is the direction of the organization. You agree that this level of profitability is acceptable. You agree that a turnover rate among the employee workforce should be at a certain level or better or less. And so often is the case that somebody comes in, maybe they're hired in because they were successful in a prior life, and that doesn't mean necessarily that they'll be successful in the current assignment. They may implement what they're familiar with and change things up, and then the result is that flavor of the week or flavor of the month. That's the way the workforce sees this. Everybody will say to themselves, I thought we were doing pretty well with what we had, and now this new person just wants to change things for change's sake. And maybe there's pressure, as Forrest mentioned, there's pressure from shareholders, from Wall Street, from venture capitalists. There's all kinds of pressures that will buffet the organization, but a strategic plan buffers the organization in that it gives stability and it gives a perspective out for 3 to 5 years. So you would have to argue that if we're going to change things wholesale, what about what we intended to do in 5 years? And if we're not competitive in our market niche, then why is that the case? Are we not producing good enough products to retain customers or attract customers, or are our products inconsistent with customer expectations here and into the future?
Great, thank you. Another question here, and we may have time for one more. Would you say that the IEE approach matches that of Deming's philosophies?
Yes, I would, Elon. I think that this is the closest matchup and marriage between a business process improvement methodology and Deming's expectations. Like I said before, I've been in many business process improvement initiatives. Even before Six Sigma, I was doing these kinds of studies, DMAIC, before that was articulated by Motorola in the mid-'80s. So I see in IEE the opportunity to get back to what Deming told us early on and be consistent with looking at the system performance, because when we improve the system, we're going to recognize and obtain and enjoy benefits to the organization. If we focus on projects, we can make a big splash, make some local headlines within the organization, but overall by year end, the benefits of those are not observable in the performance of the organization.
Thanks, Robert. And speaking of of projects, I'll ask this last question. Where do you see Lean and Six Sigma projects in the coming years? How relevant do you see that being?
More relevant than ever. I think we've got a strong basis. We know that these methodologies work. We see the benefits. The line staff up through middle management into the executive management, they see the benefits. The concern is that the level of effort being devoted may not be consistent with the level of expectations that are promised. And I think that is due to the fact that we're short-sighted. We look at opportunities that will really change a process for the better, but we haven't looked at the before and after activity that leads into or from that particular process to see if we change the process, what else are we going to influence. And so I think that getting back to the basics that Deming told us about in his 14 points and in his 7 points, that we're going to realize continued returns on investment from business process improvement to the extent that we can turn it into an IEE perspective. I think those benefits will be even larger.
Amazing. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, participants, for sticking around a couple of minutes extra. This was a great presentation, Robert. So much knowledge. I would like to call to your attention if you would like to read some customer success stories with the IEE system. You can find access to those at stopfirefighting.com. Submit your interest in receiving that. We'll send that to you. And again, Robert, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome, Elon. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.